Good afternoon. Can you hear me well? Okay, perfect. So I will prefer to stand because this is the last session and want to make it a little interesting. So if both join, so he'll also the chair is empty for him. See, this session will focus on three broad themes. One is that the title is that how leadership is building the tech talent. Because this all of us are actually getting hit every day on that. And also second is that how are we nurturing the talent and how are we addressing the attrition retention problem. They are the broad three things, how leaders, how different industries have taken the call. In the interest of time, I will start. I will start with Karnath, you, because you are coming from the consulting KPMG and you have got lot of variety in terms of obviously you are supporting so many businesses from the customer point of view. So if you can understand that, what did you guys do when the pandemic hit us, and from the talent perspective, how did you enable your teams to make sure that they are running the businesses well, and what are the tools, technologies with which you enable them so that they are really productive and help deliver what they were supposed to.
Sure. Thanks, Vinod. I think the audio is clear, I hope. So I think let me address each of your questions in sequence. So first, obviously, when the pandemic was hit, everything was nice, everything was going fine. We were always designed to work in a flexible way. We didn't have much of a challenge when we had to move people from from offices to from wherever they wanted to work, right? So only thing that has changed was the talent had moved out of the building, right? They had gone somewhere. They were working from homes. They were working from different places. So that was one. And obviously that brought in different set of challenges. Obviously, while we were always designed to work with a client, go to their client place, work from the offices, work from home, but work from home wasn't very, wasn't in much of a practice. But the other two models, working from office and working for a client and with the client, was was more prevalent. When this happened, I think the challenge for sure was how do you ensure that there is consistency in the way we were delivering to the clients, because because we were not changing, the whole world was changing, and the change was not only in terms of the way people were working, the whole idea of work itself, but also the way they started opening up in terms of, let's say, essential services were open or maybe some other. So the whole pattern of technology consumption also changed, right? So the customers started, and again, we've just heard good examples with Pankaj where people started, consuming more services online. So we had to actually mirror every customer where we were serving. So let's say we were doing an audit, we couldn't have, stayed home and completed. Obviously, we did that as well when there were lockdowns. We completed the audits on Zoom, right? Or maybe Teams, right? So we had to adapt ourselves to the way a customer was working or the client was working.
And how did you keep the talent relevant for the customers and keep the energy going in that direction?
Yeah. So I think that brought in a biggest change in terms of mindset, right? What was more important before pandemic was we wanted our people to be there with us, right? Either they would be sitting next to a client, as I said, or they would be sitting in the office in front of, let's say, a leader, right? The whole idea changed, which meant that people who were working from remote also had to adapt to the newer ways of working, because the leader was in front or the client was in front, right? So they had to really leverage technology using a collaboration platform or whatever was the ideal way of collaborating with the stakeholders. That was to be done. Second was, so the conventional business, which is basically taxation and audit, they had to be done in a different ways. That means the digital quotient of each employee, right, had to go up immediately, because there was a newer way of working. You are not working the same way. You are not really doing the inventorization, or you're not doing the vouching piece when you're doing an audit physically, but you were doing digitally. So that shift had to done very, very quickly, because we were just, it was in the month of March when the lockdown happened. April balance sheets had to be signed off, especially from an audit perspective. The second big thing that happened was our advisory business. It grew very, it grew very big. Two reasons. One, obviously, the market obviously has bounced back, right? And suddenly there's been a pressure in terms of how you want to, the client started asking for transformation initiatives where obviously consulting, expertise and consulting support is required. So we started working with our clients, and we also started realizing that the needs were different, or needs are different now in comparison to what was there in the past, right? There is a need for digital transformation. There is a need for understanding newer technologies. There's a need for redesigning the overall business architecture. There's a need for relooking at the business models. We also had to upscale ourselves or upskill ourselves to the newer ways of working for the client. Because in most of the cases, we had to go advise the clients on what should be your ideal model, right? Why should you not work the same way? And again, the transition happened, right? We have seen the transition from complete offline to complete online in few months, right? Somebody from the team was actually working with the client to actually guide on how this transition can happen seamless, right? So one, understanding the business models which makes the customer shift to the newer ways of operating. Second is making sure that the customer also transitions to the newer ways, right? And third, making sure that the customer also becomes more successful in the transition. I think those were the key capabilities, right? Which also meant that the talent also had to work under stress, because now you're not, as I said, you're not working in the office, you're working in home, there are home pressures, there are health issues, whatever that may be, right? You continue to work under pressure and continue to deliver. That means you have to be more resilient. So we had to do a lot of investments in terms of mental well-being, right? Making sure that the managers are constantly connecting with the employees. The engagement had to be brought up. What was in 2019 the level of engagements with the employees? I would say it's multifolds now, right? In terms of the engagements. That's the second part. Third part is constant upskilling, right? I did talk about the business models, but we started signing up with some of the online platforms, right? And made sure that we create curated programs for our people so that they are able to understand those technologies, have conversations with clients, look at the reference models that are available globally. So we're a global organization. What could be happening in, let's say, Western world, I could simply replicate in India, because obviously I would have an access to that kind of knowledge base. Sure. So making sure that people are updated with all sorts of use cases, technological advances, right? And in fact, I also had to go through certain programs, which obviously, which was important, right? Be on technology itself. And we've also realized that it's all about resiliency, right? Are you able to, and to my earlier point, it's not about only working under stress, but it's also about being resilient. Are you able to quickly bounce back from your own personal situation?
Absolutely. I'll take a point from there, Harnath. Thanks for bringing up that the talent had to be nurtured, talent had to be made aware about the new operating model. And what I saw from the industry also, that talent wanted to streamline their careers. They wanted to take the relevant trainings, which are new roles have started emerging. A lot of people have started going into agile way. And a lot of partner dependency was also there, because there was education needed on the partner side. So I'll go to Sanjay. You are from industry perspective as a CIO. How did you make sure that your employees, your partners, because from the broader scheme of things, are well equipped and they are getting the right training and exposure to the new age digital technologies? And also, while your employees, they can shape up their careers also, how their goals got aligned. And what are the investments you did as a CIO for the company, which helped them to shape up their careers?
So I'll just supplement a little bit what Harnath, he adequately covered the pandemic period, how organizations sort of reacted or sort of recalibrated their proactive strategy during that period. However, the whole aspect of talent management was anyway there even before the pandemic. And there are some statistics which actually sort of expose that position. The US Bureau of Statistics says that, productivity in the last 65 years, in a period from 1950 to 2015, actually rose by only 2.5%. And the extent of non-routine work also went up from 40% up to 60% in 2013, and they expect it to go up to 65% in 2025. So if I were to draw an inference here, that one was because widgets of work were getting miniaturized, automated, and in some cases simplified. So what happened? A large element of non-routine work occupied that space. And secondly, therefore, if you were to then analyze that non-routine work, you would find that either it was the routine work was getting subsumed in things like automation, either it could be process automation, etc. But non-routine work, because of VUCA and pandemic-related activities, actually brought in a lot of question marks to the management. Therefore, in terms of coming back to your point that how they were shaping their careers, in our context, one would have a mix of legacy systems. Like you have legacy systems, which is a well-known fact in banks, insurance, and even airlines. And a mix of ERP and legacy systems actually sort of accelerated the modernization program that we were doing in trying to integrate some of the IDE tools and also API management systems into the legacy systems that we were already having. So, which meant that your cash cow still came from some of those systems which are already running, but you also had to accommodate newer tools into the ecosystem. So people who were sort of well trained in their comfort zone had to be moved out, but at the same time people needed to be pursuing what they were doing best in order to make the engine running. And therefore, if you look at the, if you take the slice, it is not just the top performers which needed to be addressed, which is top 15%, but also the workhorses which really were in the middle, so that the systems remain stabilized. And at the same time, the cost of recruitment and keeping them on board is so high. You also needed to have a very strong performance improvement program. Even a return of 5 to 10% on a performance improvement program really gave dividends, because it saved the whole cycle time for a user company to get talent from the market, which anyway is getting affected by lots of the FANG bubble, which is anyway hitting most of the ISV majors in India. So the approach was threefold. One for the top performers, second was for the workhorses, and third was for the performance improvement program. Now, I'll just step back and say that that is not all, because we are not, it's not that the only team inside which is able to deliver. It has a mix of getting support from the partner ecosystem, which meant you would have your established players in the IT services field who are your partners, and at the same time there will be niche players. That means startups. You are running a AI/ML program, and you need to work with the startups. So all those three sources of work needed to be addressed. That means your internal teams, your the established IT partners, because ultimately it's all depends on the person. Even an Infosys or a TCS doing work for you, the ultimate delivery actually gets pinpointed to the person who's developing or working for you. So you needed to ensure that all these three sources of, I'm not getting appropriate word for the forum, because all these three sources needed to be addressed. And that is where the challenge was. So if I were to break this, internal, top performers, workforce, workhorses, and the lower end, whatever you can sort of cheese out from the bottom. Second is your top IT partners, and third is engaging with the startups ecosystem and the niche partners to make sure that you are able to deliver your core outcomes along with the innovation projects that you are wanting to deliver. So at this point, I'll pause, and I'll come back to another aspect at the end of the session.
Thank you, Sanjay. So, Pankaj, I have kept special question for you. So, See, most of us are struggling with retaining the talent. And there are companies where attrition is low. What is that secret sauce which those companies are following and which we can take probably few pages of that book and try to implement it? Because there are things are working, whether it is employee engagement, whether it is development, career development, whether it is work-life balance, whether it is the overall environment culture. So what from your perspective, your experience, that what really should work or can work as a best practice, which some of us can take as a input to improve the employee retention?
Thank you. So I think, before coming to your question, I think all of us have been facing this, that digital or tech talent is going to be a lot more in demand than what it is today. We have already seen that in last 2-3 years. I think many of us would have faced this, that these salaries are hitting the roof.
Not many, all.
Right?
All of
In
us
the
are
tech talent, whereas in other industries during pandemic, there were job cuts. And the easy solution we figured out is that, we going into this rat race of, making counter offer and all that. This is a reality we accept. But as Vinod mentioned, there are companies which have been able to retain their talent. I think, as I mentioned in my presentation also, the secret sauce is culture. And I firmly believe in this adage that employees come first, customer comes second, shareholders come third, and many of you would not like it. But it is only happy, motivated, inspired employees which can bring delighted customer. And if you have a happy employee and delighted customer, shareholder value is automatically going to be taken care. But how many of us have that mindset is something which we need to honestly reflect on. I would talk about my previous organization. It was a SaaS startup, and I happen to also be CHRO in that organization. And when pandemic hit, there are quite a few initiatives that we started. One, of course, we have spoken about emphasis on continuous relevant training and upskilling. But there were quite a few other things that we defined. One was making sure that everyone in the organization has a growth path, and they know what it would take. Right? Both horizontally they can grow, vertically they can grow, and what it would take them to move on that growth path. Right? And then I gave this mandate to my OD team that 3 quarters down the line, if I'm taking or speaking to somebody randomly, 8 out of 10 employees should know what is their growth path and what it takes. We changed our performance system, and I don't like performance evaluation or performance management, because if we are managing performance, we are limiting ourselves. Right? If you have to inspire as a leader. So I like the term performance evaluation. If every one of our employee or 80% of our employee are doing better than where they were last quarter or last year, I think overall organization and everybody would benefit. So performance evaluation was only one part of it. Right? Every manager, it was made mandatory that they have to identify the growth path of the employee working with them. And they have to list down areas on how the employee would move on that path. It may be external training, it may be some role responsibility, and a significant weightage of KRA for managers was how good is their section, which we were calling as individual development plan, and we were tracking it every quarter. Right?
See, Pankaj, if I can interrupt here, what I have seen lot of companies who have IT department, IT division, they don't have career path defined for their employees. And they 1 year, 2 year, either is a architect at max or senior architect. The person has no clue where that person can go. Maybe the person changes their mind. We talk about ninja developers, ninja coders, ninja architects. The person may enter into the domain and go somewhere else. I think the depiction is not there, the evaluation is not there, the goals, anything you feel that is important or critical?
Yes, I think it takes initially some time. So we worked with Mercer and created a job role framework, architecture framework, as well as competency and proficiency framework. Right? That what are different stream, as you mentioned, there is a IC stream which created that you don't need to be one of, whether it is technology or sales or any place. One of the worst mistake we make is somebody is performing very high. As an individual contributor, we make that person a manager without realizing whether the person would really inspired by that or loves that. And that's the only growth path we leave for organization. So we created a parallel stream up to the VP level, SVP level, in fact, like calling them distinguished engineers or architects for IC, and or similarly on the management ladder, and clearly define that what are the proficiency and competencies needed for them, and then did multiple training session for them, and then identify training areas. So I think, of course, it's not no shortcut would work, but once we spend that time, I think the benefits would be immense from this, because I think most of us would realize, money comes a priority, but I think more than that, we love everyone. I believe, I'm going into human psychology and behavior here, but most of us inside have something which want to express itself fully in the external world.
I think Sanjay has a point. Sanjay, you want to address? You want to highlight the point.
Yeah, so I think, this concept of chief programmer, what we typically saw in the IBM world, can probably happen in an IT services organization, and even in one of my previous organizations, you do still have this concept of distinguished scientists and distinguished professional. However, typically in a user organization, the way we have looked at it is, it's no more that one is working in an area 100%, sort of cocooned, and we actually ask him in his annual development plan that at least 15 to 20% of his objectives should be in a technology, which is, it was SMAC, one of the elements of SMAC that he should pick up, and it was, he should have no fear of failure, but at the same time, be able to conduct adequate proof of concepts, do pilots with the business, which meant that 20% of his time went in understanding the business domain. And why I'm saying business domain? Because companies are getting affected by adjacencies as well, not only from their own sectors, but from sectors around. So, and if you don't understand your own domain, that's the first area that you're going to get hit. Secondly, in any new technology or project of enterprise importance, we formulated, there would be one person responsible, which we call, for simplicity, it's called FPR, first person responsible, and a second person responsible. And I would review the project with the second person responsible, meaning that a lot of information is sort of not held back by the first person responsible, which typically happens, it's information is power. And the first person's evaluation will get done how good the second person responsible has actually responded on his project reviews. So there was no option for the first person review not to, to hold back anything from the second person, which is often seen as a threat because, he is likely to take over. So this is one thing which works well, and the other thing is at the end of the year, that 15 to 20%. And if you find that that gentleman has actually delivered in a new project initiative, that means you can think of moving around into a non-comfort zone where he can deliver. And what also has happened is, everybody wants to work in data analytics and in IoT projects. He may be in infrastructure, he may be in, and cyber security to some extent, but they realize that's a lot of hard work without getting the right prize, even if you're successful. So one has to overmanage that situation and give, so you can give that 20% to somebody who's working in infrastructure and tell them that you work on an AIML project and have a weightage of 5 to 10%. But if he doesn't deliver in the end of the first year through a proper POC or pilot, there is enough discussion across the table by which you, guy, you need to really, you're doing good work in your own area, so you go along there. But we'll leave that for some other time to have this discussion. Yeah. So you need to have such data points to actually counter this. And the other point, during the pandemic, how we were, one, retention was not an issue, was we really went skip levels, to people whom we normally don't talk in our day-to-day work, and really ask about their welfare, and they would be surprised because they would never have got a call earlier from senior levels asking only about their welfare. So that stuck in their mind, and it was not lip service, it was actual empathy, asking about whether a vaccination has happened, and because of some reason it was not got done. I would sort of take that extra step forward to get that done.
No.
So that would remain in the mind share
That's correct.
next 2 to 3 years to come.
Absolutely. Sanjay, I think I will pick one point from there. It is the employee connect. And that question, I will put a little bit quoting around that and put a flavor of Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, Gen Z. So you are managing this now 3 generations in IT. People who are Gen X, traditional mainframe people, seen client server, seen internet, seen digital. You have other generation who have 90 born, they don't know what a fax machine looks like, and they have a different way. You have now Gen Z also, who are absolutely after 2010. So how do we as a CIOs manage this talent while fulfilling their aspirations? I don't know if you have heard the term continuous partial attention. Gen X cannot do that. Gen X does everything in sequence, while as Gen Y and Z, they can actually do that multiple things at the same time. So how does this whole paradigm to be managed by the CIOs while we address the tech talent? Quick from Harnath.
So I think we know the 2 parts of this, right? One, obviously, when you're dealing with your own teams, and second is when you're dealing with users. Obviously, as a CIO, when you look at a business where you have users, and to your point, 3 generations and possibly 4 generations now, right?
Yes.
Who are there. People from 60s to practically last
Baby boomers,
baby
yes.
boomers, right? They're baby boomers to the Gen Z as well, coming into workforce. I think the experience and the expectations are different, to your point, right? The newer generation has more instant gratification problem, right, and lesser attention span, right? So are you creating enough avenues or enough solutions? When I'm saying solutions, basically you're trying to satisfy those needs, right? If you talk about any solution that you deploy today, and you make this like an SAP, I'm just taking for the sake of example, SAP screen. So your new latest invention should not be looking like an SAP screen. It should be looking like a Google screen with one field, right? Or maybe a chat.
Correct.
Right, a chat. So are you changing yourself? Are you shifting gears by yourself, right? Are you ensuring that you are transitioning your enterprise systems to the newer ways of working, right? You're partially solving the problem. Coming to the ones who are, let's say, the first generation employees, I think we are seeing that change as well, right? So while they may be slow in adoption, but the ecosystem has been forcing them also to change. It's not that we changing, right? So let's say you're talking about an employee who is still used to working on SAP or whichever system, right? The older style of working. But when you go out, right? When you go out in the market, likes of Lenscards or likes of, let's say, Geo platform, which I'm just taking for the example, right? They may be giving a completely different experience. So you can't be cut off. So what's happening is the transition is happening. It's making the job of CIOs much more easier, right?
Correct.
We are not fighting the battle alone. The whole ecosystem is pushing people to change to that, right?
Sure.
If you're not really, and again, I can take examples where people are happy to do what they were doing in the past, right? A person who was doing, let's say he was doing reconciliation on Excel sheets, right? He's from, he's from, let's say, 1 generation back, he's happily doing it. But I think creating that awareness, saying that you continue to do this for 1 more year, you're obsolete. You can't work. Awareness is more important. Sure. Change management is more important, right? I think, 1, the whole ecosystem is playing well. 2nd, making sure that you're making them aware of what's coming in. And 3rd is you manage the change very effectively.
Absolutely. So we have only 5 minutes left. I would like some audience questions, please.
So, at a point of view, I mean that we talk about developing talent in a view like this with limited opportunities, as you said, Sanjay, in a traditional IT organization. We have 30 people and the organization is 2,000 people, and everybody wants your job. It's not going to happen. So, around the beginning of the pandemic, we sat down because we recognized that this is happening, and we lost a couple of big wickets early, and then the view was what is it that we are talking to these people about from a employee value proposition kind of a thing, which is what do we have by way of currency. You can't give outsized raises because that is in violation of company policy. You can't promote everybody because there's a bell curve. All of that crap, and I think I'd love to meet an organization here that doesn't have those problems because I would like to join them. Right.
Keep searching.
But so what we talked about, we got some HR guys into the room and we said, let's craft this proposition of what we bring. What do we have to offer, if anything? And we came to the conclusion that the only thing we really have to offer is outsized projects, that is big projects, impactful projects. And we said, if that is our currency, let's articulate our currency. Everybody that we hired from them, we said, look, it takes 3 years to get promoted in our organization. So we look at you, or we look at your participation as an investment of 3 years. What we have to do is we give you great projects to bolster your profile. And because of the various vacuums and various goals we have, we give you direct exposure to top leadership from the point of view of expressing and managing their project. And what we found is that once you level with that, and the view is really this, that over 3 years we expect you to deliver a number of things. We will throw that at you. And then some of you will stick with the organization, will vibe with the culture of the organization and go to the top. And some of you will go on and do something else in some other company and never get promoted in this organization. I think it helps to be more realistic. And finally, this works or seems to work across both Y and Z equally well.
That's a good point. Absolutely. Basically, what is there, for them from the, what company is offering to them?
I think one example, in terms of this ZX and Z. Unfortunately, I shouldn't use the word unfortunately. Statistically, we find that we are highly disposed to the Xenex predominance in our teams. That's historically it's there, and probably it would include myself as well. So what we have done when I talked about doing those working together, so we constituted a CFT. Let me take a real life example. In my past organization, we were trying to do a voice bot project, making sure that the customer interaction happens, through a bot. And we made technical success through a POC, but it remained restricted to Western type English, the Alexas and the Siris of the world. So now we were looking at incorporating 2 Indian languages, Hindi and Bengali, along with Indian English. So 2 things were required. One is the whole process of from the IVR to the call center, the process needed to be understood from an organizational perspective and also from a consumer perspective, which meant you needed experienced people to be on the project. And at the same time, you had the freshers who came with the tools but didn't know how to go about it. So the team that was formed, we can't call it a CFT because they were all part of the same function, but it was across levels. So there was two-way mentoring that was expected to happen. Not all projects were successful. So I'm talking about a successful project. And there, the gentleman with his gray hair was able to actually go through the process, dissect, saying that over the years, this widget was traveling from table A to table B, table C over the years, but now we can get rid of B and C. So he was talking not from a technical perspective, but from understanding of the process. And this guy was then able to institute, of course, working with one of our partners to incorporate some of the NLP
No, it's a great example of cross-gen CFT.
So both of them were successful, and the project came live in early this year. Of course, we had to generate. We were initially working on synthetic data. Then we got historically the label data, and the process of learning is still on for the bot to really move from stage 1 to stage 2. But it's live.
Perfect. We have one more question we can take from audience if you have. Any questions? Kapil, you have a question? You have to ask.
So what Pankaj said, absolutely right, actually, because if you're working in a service class company, it's very difficult because the size of the service class companies are very large, or manufacturing, where the IT size is very small. Setting up the, his growth path is very, very difficult. Because you are not IT, because if someone is working in your organization and you have 7,000 people under you, you can definitely give the growth path. You are a developer, then senior developer, architect, and then so on. Another example you gave, like the moment you're promoting to the management. So there are two streams. Either you go to technical or you go to the management. Right. The moment technical person is moving towards the management side, we are losing the potential skill set. It is very difficult to basically nurture again and the finding from the outside, right? And the moment you give the promotion to someone as a manager, like it is a blood in the mouth, and then he will never look back. This is what exactly happened with me. If I look at myself, I was very good programmer of Java, like 7, 8 years, 10 years. Like I worked as a programmer, but the moment like I adopted the management side, then I so-called trying to myself be techno manager, techno functional manager, but it cannot be. Gradually, like I things were pushing me to the more management, because sitting in the meeting and talking and then losing the technology flavor, it's a very difficult actually. It's not a easy equation all around.
No, it is not. You're right.
So,
Yeah.
if I can make a point, I think, again, this is, I have learned hard way. But generally when we say growth path, right, we get stuck to engineer, senior engineer, or GM, AVP, VP. That's one dimension of growth path. A lot of growth path is about your skill development. How are you developing, how are you building your CV in a real manner, not just, right? So working on different type of problems, the impact that you can create, right? I think that both on the talent side as well as we also as a leader is something that we ignore. And I would give you a very recent example. Recently, one of my VP, he was not very happy, right? And what he told me is that you have made me VP and you have increased my mandate, right? But I'm still doing the role of DGM. Right? So for him, the growth was not that he has become VP. So it was looking at how can I think more strategically? How can I expand, go deep into, how, for example, he wanted to learn more about leadership, about strategic. So I think that is something we as a leader need to also tell people. And I have seen that, a lot of people, when they understand this part, appreciating that. I think the other thing is, even if there is a limited size, events like, hackathon, making them participate in external event, and those things also help them in terms of seeing that we are growing.
Absolutely. So in the interest of time, thank you Sanjay, Arnath and Pankaj for a wonderful discussion. Big round of applause to them. Great.
I will request Shamanuj to keep one session. We didn't touch upon an elephant in the room, which is the gig economy.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So for some other time. Yeah, the great resignation and the gig.
Absolutely. Now we need probably 2 hours for that. So Shamanuja, back to you. Thank you so much.